Before we start off this episode, please be warned of the plosive T and P sounds along with some background noise or choppy audio, as our boom arms and pop filters have not arrived. This will be better by the next episode. Enjoy. Hey all, welcome to the first episode of the Recall Pod. I'm Hayden, and I'm one of the co-hosts for this podcast. I'm currently a Year 11 IGCSE student.
Hi, I'm Kieran. I'm an IGCSE student in Year 11, and this is the first episode of our podcast. So in this podcast, we're just going to be catching up with each other, talking about the content of the podcast, and basically just talk about what you expect from us in future episodes.
Yeah, so Kieran, how has your week been?
Been pretty good. Obviously, first day of school today, so early wake up.
Early wake up, back at it, and it's nice seeing everyone again, and of course getting our mock results back, which we might possibly touch upon later in the episode. So should we start off by talking about what the content of our podcast are? And I think we should kind of talk about our inspiration for this podcast. So as the audience probably in this niche knows, we're all into productivity, studying active recall, spaced repetition, hence the origin of the name Recall Pod, which is basically a podcast where we sort of touch on topics of our syllabuses to provide some active recall content for any listeners we have.
We aim to just share our point of view of the syllabus and maybe even give you guys some tips on how you can incorporate active recall into your studies, even if we're doing different subjects. So I want to talk about more like why we did this podcast.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because I'm sure most of the audience might know there's this technique called the Feynman technique, I believe. And there's basically this quote or line that says, to truly understand something, you have to be able to teach your 5-year-old. And we think in order to improve understanding in the topics we learn, it's probably pretty nice to teach people what we're learning as we go along and to actively test ourselves. So talking about syllabus covering, I think we both take the IGCSE syllabus and we'll soon move on to the IB syllabuses. So we could touch upon topics about economics, chemistry, computer science, which we're both really passionate about. Yeah, Kieran.
So if you want to know what IGCSE subjects we actually take, so we both take computer science, economics, obviously math and English. We also take history, which is a pretty interesting subject, I think, for the podcast. And obviously a language, I do French, you do Chinese. So pretty much we're going to be maybe briefly talking about syllabuses for each of these subjects and maybe just go over our personal opinions on them, or maybe the best ways to incorporate techniques such as active recall into your revision for these subjects or any similar subject.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And just as sort of a side note to continue on this, we'll probably be talking to quite a few teachers or other peers, classmates on topics relating to studies and productivity, just because we think that it's really important to hear perspectives from the teachers themselves and what they want the students to achieve, and as well as just talking about productivity, studying, just learning with other classmates. So, Kieran, you want to talk about what else we might cover on this podcast?
So, obviously, as you know, with podcasts, we can basically talk about anything. So, one part of our podcast would be about syllabus and our IGCSE subjects and our academic side. But we also would cover things such as reviewing tech products, maybe reviewing productivity YouTubers, and basically giving our perspective of the online world. So pretty much everything. If you ever want to reach out to us or recommend anything to us, just check out our website and leave a message there if you want to.
Yeah, and regarding the website, we'll soon host it at pod.recallos.com. That is pod.recallos, which is recall, RECALLOS.com. And you can possibly also email us at hi@recallos.com soon. Hopefully we'll set that up as soon as we finish this podcast episode. So we can also talk about productivity tips, as Kieran mentioned, like active recall, spaced repetition, we might provide guiding questions when we cover our syllabuses just to prompt you into thinking.
So, do you have any specific revision tips that you particularly use and you recommend to others?
I think it might be quite obvious currently since our podcast is the recall pod, and of course, active recall is a main part. And I'm sure Kieran uses the Anki flashcard method, whereas I use the Ali Abdal Google Sheets method, which to both of us proven to be effective as we've just finished our mocks and we're relatively happy with most of our scores. So after this podcast, what are our aims and how frequent should we actually post?
I was thinking about once a week. Obviously, we need to see how that works, but I think it's pretty good for us. We want to give as much content out there as for you guys, and it's also fun for us to do. So we'll see how it goes. Once a week is our aim at this point of time, but we could possibly do more. Maybe we have some weeks we may not even be able to film at all. So it really depends, but we aim for at least once a week, and we are open to feedback.
Yeah, so definitely we'll soon also set up our email. We'll set up our social media links, Twitter. We'll put up our Notion webpage, etc. And we'll all post that down in the description below the Spotify or wherever you're listening to our podcast. And we also aim to somehow possibly find sponsorships in the near future just to incentivize us to continue to film our episodes and perhaps provide some perks and benefits to the listeners. And so currently we've both sort of ordered and planning to get some boom arms and some pop filters, so our audio quality will soon be much, much better.
Also, talking about the equipment we use and the tech we use, is there any tech that you particularly recommend to people and that you use currently?
Yeah, always drop us a message, an email, whatever, just to recommend us anything. If we have the ability, we'll definitely try to check it out. So what tech we're using currently for this podcast include the HyperX Cellocast mic, which we both picked up right after our mocks. So we're open to feedback on any production improvements in the near future.
So I currently use the MX Master 2S, I think, as my current mouse, and I think it's a pretty ergonomic mouse. I got it in a pretty good deal. I think around £40, so around 400 Hong Kong dollars. As you know, we do live in Hong Kong, so I do recommend it to you guys, and we will put affiliate links and everything in our websites if you want to check it out, and we'll get a small kickback, right, if we do successfully.
We'll set that up soon. And yeah, our main tech we want to always recommend to the people is always get a good microphone, especially in the times where you're doing a bunch of Zoom calls every day, Zoom class. Although Zoom sort of compresses, there's a function to turn on original sound to get the best sound quality. We also recommend, as Kieran said, a really good mouse because you're basically touching your mouse the whole time when you're interacting with a keyboard. So interacting with a monitor. And also a keyboard is really important. I'm sure Kieran's planning on picking up a mechanical keyboard soon, as mechanical keyboards are a game changer if you watched Ali's video on how he types so fast.
So you use a mechanical keyboard, right? So want to know tell us a bit about how it is to actually use mechanical keyboard?
Yes, sure. So I currently have the RK61 with blue switches, and quite frankly, it's sort of game changing. Not only do I think the click keyness is really nice, but sort of just having this keyboard that provides tactile feedback as you're interacting with a keyboard is sort of a satisfying experience and sort of incentivizes me to study more. But for mechanical keyboards, there's a whole world. There's a very big subreddit about it. So always check it out if you want to learn more about mechanical keyboards. I'm definitely not an expert as I haven't built my own custom mechanical keyboard, but who knows? It might be something. It might be a project in the near future.
You touched upon Ali in the when you were talking. I want to bring
Yeah.
about more about other productivity YouTubers that you watch and what they aim to provide to the audience. So, want to like quickly review some of these channels?
Yeah, let's segue into a, a part of our podcast as we want more content. We want to start by talking about maybe Ali Abdal. How often do you watch him? What do you like about him? What don't you like about him?
So I'm like pulling up his channel right now. You know, he's a pretty in the productive niche. I would say he's probably the most well known and statistically also the biggest. 1.45 million subscribers. He's got over 95 million views, so that's insane. At least for the niche, I
Yeah.
would say. So I do watch him
hmm
a fair amount. I um especially during my revision, I always try to find ways to improve my revision. So he's always been someone I watch during times like that, and also just for fun, watching his tech reviews and just other vlogs he puts out. So he's a pretty good YouTuber. I thoroughly recommend him to you guys, especially if you watch this podcast. Uh, yeah. So what do you think about him?
Yeah, Ali Abdal. He's quite frankly the best productivity YouTuber in my opinion out there. Of course, there is still Matt Diavella who touches not specifically in productivity, but more of the minimalist movement and does sort of talk about productivity. There's also Thomas Frank. There's smaller YouTubers, but definitely very promising in the future, like Yudoka. And yeah, Ali Abdal. I watch him quite a lot as I think his content is quite satisfying to watch in the sense that his videos are very well produced. There's nice music to it. His setups is just really well made. The cable he could work a little bit on the cable management, but I do think just watching his videos, his titles like for example the My Secret to Beating the Imposter Syndrome very interesting to
Yeah, I
watch.
really find
And
like it's something hard to actually get past the imposter syndrome. Like
yeah,
a lot of people out there
definitely.
probably struggle to put themselves out there, especially in like platforms such as YouTube and even podcasts. But I think it's a important concept that a lot of people should be introduced to. So I think I thoroughly recommend watching that particular video.
Yeah, definitely. He also does a bunch of book reviews like for example, one of my favorite ones include what's it called? Give me a second. It was the book that most changed my life, and where he talks about the 4 hour work week, which is a book that I'm planning to read. And of course, most of the books that I currently read on my Kindle are um, sort of inspired based on his book reviews. Like for example, I've been really into Stoic philosophy nowadays because of reading his watching his videos on the Obstacle is a Way book review, and now I sort of read more about Ryan Holiday's books, such as Obstacle is a Way, and it's quite frankly life changing, especially to us teenagers in this current pandemic and this society.
Yeah, I would say he's been very inspiring for people like us. I think well, he's probably one of the reasons we actually started this podcast. You know.
Exactly. Yeah. So this probably doesn't bring any listeners, but shout out to Ali and Timer Abdal's Not Overthinking podcast, which is sort of an inspiration for a podcast. As I quite like the sort of calm but also intriguing conversations they have. It's just the perfect podcast to put on when you're on a walk, on a run, just doing other stuff.
So I want to talk more
Yeah,
about a YouTuber who's probably relatively unknown at this time, but I think he's someone who
yeah,
really stood out to us, especially because he's the same age as us. That's Adoka
yeah,
Fintelman. So he's
yeah.
yeah. You want to talk?
Yeah, so Yudoka Finneman, as we're filming this podcast, he has at 24.1K subscribers, which is insane for a YouTuber that hasn't been posting for too long, less than a year, 8 months. His videos are really relatable, especially those about active recall in GCSE, which is very interesting to watch. Also his study with me's, his first day of school, also his time management notion and GCSE videos are just really relatable, and we can always learn from him.
Speaking about GCSE, how did you actually find, like, we're coming to the end of the 2 year course. Obviously, it was
Yeah.
pretty weird. Obviously, we have some exams canceled, some exams going ahead, so it's pretty difficult time. But how did you really like find the 2 years?
I think GCSE is quite. I mean, we do the IGCSE, which some might argue is a little harder, but I think GCSEs are quite a step up from what we've been doing before. Like in year 9. I still remember in year 9 where we would be going to class as so at school we are in sort of known as tutor classes where we're all in the same houses or the same houses, and these are the classes that stick with us from year 7 to year 13, so we're really close. But since the IGCSE, as we all take our own subjects, we sort of spread apart, and it's much more different. But I think the course itself, as long as you put in the effort and of course watch productivity YouTubers like Ali, Yudoka, they sort of provide a bunch of really good tips that assists you in your GCSEs, which makes it not too hard in my opinion. It's quite doable.
I would say like
Yeah, what do you think?
one mistake I think I made, at least for GCSE, was not starting early enough, like your revision,
Yeah.
because it's really hard to like, especially incorporate active recall and actually be able to retain that much content in like a short span of time. I mean, it is doable, but you got to put in a lot of effort. So I would say like my advice would probably be to start as early as possible. Like even if that's like small revision sessions, like the faster you start incorporating these like strategies, like the more beneficial it can be. So, but overall, I feel like it was a pretty enjoyable experience. Obviously, it's a shame that we couldn't do all our exams, but
Yeah.
and just hopefully we get the grades we deserve.
Yeah, really, actually. But I think this also brings up a really important topic. Do you think grades reflect the effort someone puts in into studying? I think this is quite an important,
Yeah.
I mean, quite an interesting topic to touch upon. What do you think?
I would
about
say
this?
like how like some people like say it's the effort that counts, right?
Mhm.
Because like if you put in the effort but you don't get the grade you deserve, it could like mean two things. One, maybe you're not revising efficiently enough, or maybe you just that's your maximum capacity of like how much you can actually
Yeah.
work. So like there's two ways to think of it, but like if you strongly believe you're not getting the grade you deserve, then you may have to like start thinking about how actually like you revise. Like are you revising the best way? But if you did actually put 100% effort, then maybe it's just that's how you stand, and maybe you just have to find ways to improve basically. So I think yes and no. Like there's obviously two sides to it. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think grades itself is quite problematic in the sense that, as you touched upon, not everyone has the same capacity when it comes to studying and exams and stuff. So I think this sounds really absurd, but imagine if GCSEs, on top of doing an actual test, you sort of get a combination of the actual test along with a sort of effort grade in a sense, which is assigned by the teacher. So, for example, on a report card, you get, for example, computer science, and then you get 9 in computer science. But next to it, you also get some sort of effort grade, which the teacher that has been teaching you would assign to you. What do you think about this? Because I think for example, further education and stuff, on top of being smart, you also have to be able to prove that you've put in the effort, the dedication, and not just breeze past. But I'm not saying that it's necessarily bad, but what do you think about putting an effort grade on a GCSE
Yeah, because I
report
feel
card?
like the point of taking IGCSE subjects because you thoroughly enjoy these subjects. So if you're just taking them for like an easy A star, then I wouldn't say it's like the best thing, because what teachers actually want is you putting the effort to actually learn the content. Because I feel like a grade is a grade, but like content, I think the actual content you learn is actually much more important than the grade, because it's something that sticks with you and something that you can incorporate in real life. So I think effort, I think it would actually be, I strongly agree that we should have some sort of effort grade, because I do feel like students who do put in more effort in class do deserve at least a bit more than students who just do a subject just for getting a grade. Because I do feel like the whole point of teachers actually teaching you and even sometimes even going outside the spec sometimes is for you to actually like retain the content and actually like learn something new. So I do feel like, yeah. All right, so let's talk about something that we're going to be doing next year. We're going to be moving on to the IB diploma, which I mean, a lot of people say that it's a really difficult course. So how do you feel about it? Like your initial like thoughts about IB?
Yeah, maybe we should actually talk about what subjects we're choosing
Oh
first.
yeah.
So, Kieran and I are both taking. Coincidentally, we both have the same interests, same passions, same hobbies. So we're both taking Chem HL.
So I want to look at like briefly like the syllabus of HL Chem. I know this is not like thoroughly relevant, but I just want to know like briefly like what we could actually learn. So we're learning things such as like the usual things we learn at GCSE. Probably there's like a lot of like new things that we haven't learned, like a bit more into organic chemistry. We haven't really like touched upon it in GCSE yet.
Yeah, but I think, of course, we don't have the textbooks, but based on conversations with teachers, reading syllabuses, looking at past papers, to some extent that some content is overlappable. I might be wrong on this because I haven't started the course yet. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think doing well in GCSE Chem will set you up pretty well for IB Chem.
Yeah, so another similar HL subject we're taking is HL Computer Science, which I think is probably the main subject we're leading towards in terms of future aspirations. So how do you feel about computer science? I know like you're pretty good at it from GCSE.
Computer science, it's definitely a subject we both really enjoy. Programming, building up web apps, learning new languages, the logic behind it. It's just something that we're both really, really interested in. And I think we should sort of dedicate this to our computer science teacher. So shout out to Mr. Baumgarten at pbaumgarten.com. That is PBAUMGARTEN.com, where he has excellent resources on learning how to program and getting you started on tkinter projects, Flask apps, any sort of Python, Java, JavaScript related project. So definitely worth check out. He's also on YouTube. I believe his name is Paul Baumgarten. Yes, Paul Baumgarten. And you can always check out his videos on how to build JavaScript, Python games and stuff.
Possible future guest.
Possible future guest. Who knows? We might get him, hopefully, on the next episode of our podcast just to talk about how to get started in programming and why he chose to teach programming and a bunch of other questions that might come up.
So I want to briefly talk about programming. Like, I know you're pretty passionate about it, you're pretty strong in it, but like you told me that you've actually never, like excluding like in school, you've never actually programmed before computer science. Is that true?
Yeah, that's true. I think. Yeah. Go on.
No, you can go.
Yeah, so I think programming is often a thing that scares people. Like, quite frankly, before the course programming, if someone said programming or coding, well, what comes to your head? You just see this black screen with a bunch of text on it.
I mean, people most often compares it to like learning a new language. And people usually get overwhelmed by like typing out things which are unusual to them. But I do think in this day and age, learning to code is, I think, going to become very, very important in the next like decade or so, just because of how the world is shaping up.
Yeah, definitely. I think we should do an episode where we just sort of define programming, as in sense not teaching programming, but just defining programming. Like, what is even programming? Because we often think that when we get into programming, it's definitely building iOS apps or Android apps or websites. But in a sense, programming itself is just solving problems. I think we should do an episode.
Yeah,
on
I
that,
do
actually.
think like this side.
I
do think like this side of programming is not explored as much as There's a lot of great resources out there teaching you how to program, but I think we need to know more about why do people program? What's the purpose
and
of
what
it?
is programming?
What is programming?
Yeah, and like, how do you start programming? Like, where do you type up the program? Where do you type up the code? I think we should touch upon these simple questions in an episode soon. Perhaps we can bring it up in our interview with Mr. Baumgarten soon if he likes.
Yeah.
And
So we also going to be taking HL math as well. So how do you feel about that? Very.
ooh, HL maths. Well, maths is in some way very similar to programming. And I say that because programming somehow helps you be able to solve math problems. Because, for example, if you get a problem solving question, if you're able to program, you sort of be able to put them into blocks, if that makes sense. Because once you start learning a program, you somehow just happen to know how to dissect programs into smaller pieces that make sense. It just somehow happens as you learn how to program. So that's quite useful for maths and other sort of number heavy courses. Oh yeah, so Kieran, you currently haven't taken ad maths yet. What steps or what do you plan to do to ensure that you have the basic fundamentals for IBAHL, because it's honestly quite a big jump. So
Yeah,
how do you
not
gonna
to
counter
say
it?
to be mean to anyone, but like, I should be doing ad math, right?
Yeah, we don't know what happened
Yeah,
at
I mean,
our year 9 end of year exams.
I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah,
I think the thing I'm lacking, obviously, to other students who's most likely going to be picking ad math is obviously, HL math is probably ad math. So I think it's something I need to probably pick up in the next couple of months, probably the summer right before IB starts. I think there's an important concept such as calculus, which I think is explored a lot in HL math. So I think it's something I do definitely need to pick up in the next couple of months, probably after GCSEs are over.
yeah, definitely, because math AHL is because we've been talking to different teachers, been doing some research, and if we plan on moving into computer science in university, they are mostly math heavy, not even computer science heavy. It's not even required in some universities. So I think getting basic understanding in math is really important, and we might perhaps do some podcasts and catch up on what our progress is on math sometime, just to maybe perhaps teach what we've learned in a sense so that we truly understand it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what else should we talk about? This is our first episode, so we're still kind of experimenting with this whole podcast thing. We're currently at about 28 minutes, which I think is a decent one for a podcast. But for example, if you look at the Tim Ferriss show or other podcasts such as the Lex Friedman, he's a let me make sure I get this right. Lex Friedman, AI scientist. His podcast is also really, really good, especially just having these conversations with people within a specific field like AI, people that are doing philosophy. It's quite an interesting conversation to have. So yeah, Kieran, do you have anything else to touch upon?
Yeah. So what's our next goal? Is like you wanna go not just with the podcast, but just like any like future projects that you wanna talk about? Like your aspirations as we like go more into the end of our school life.
Yeah, I think this podcast is a very, very good point, a very good starting point in putting ourselves out there, because this has been something we've been planning for actually quite a while, and we honestly haven't been able to dedicate our time and effort. But I think now that we've filmed an episode, we're sort of thinking like, oh, it's actually just quite simple. It's quite nice to have, and just talking about some topics we like. It's actually quite nice having these conversations, which we should probably do more often.
Yeah, definitely.
And yeah, definitely. Well, we might also consider starting a YouTube channel soon. This is something that's also on our to-do list. Perhaps also getting better at different programming languages. Yeah, Kieran, what are your sort of short-term goals?
Yeah, I think like the podcast, as you said, is just a starting point. There's so many more things that we plan to do. So I mean, I think great thing about the online world right now is just the amount of things you can do to put yourself out there. And I think more of you guys should start looking at things outside like your little bubble of just school. And I think you should start doing more things like building yourself in the online community and like putting yourself out there. I think it's very important. I think in the next couple of years, like Ali Abdal once said that like it's very important for not for people for adults to always have like a second source of income, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like, you know, it's kind of, yeah, passive income, yeah. And something, because like feel like most people out there, like adults who work, don't really like their day jobs, if that, like, you know. So I think um doing something that you really enjoy, something like, you know, could be a podcast of your own, YouTube channel, blogs, like it's might be something that you're interested in, and like it's nice because you can even earn a bit of money from it as well.
Yeah, this brings up a really interesting topic on the creator economy. I was listening to like the Colin and Samir Show podcast, which is a really really good podcast, which I suggest Kieran you should also check out. It's called Colin Samir, Colin and Samir. Keep that on your list. They have really nice conversations about different topics and stuff. And I was listening to their creators economy episode, I think 1 or 2 days ago, and one really nice thing they touched upon was how there's sort of a middle class creator economy establishing. So what I basically mean is before this whole YouTube and podcast and Twitch and all these creator platforms, there was this sort of notion that you can either be a really small YouTuber or you could be a really big one. Like, for example, I'm looking at this and Logan Paul has popped up, Mr. Beast, David Dobrik. You can either be these really small sort of content creators or these really big multi-million dollar content creators. But what they sort of touched upon was because of the pandemic, there has been a rise in the middle class of the creator economy where they are making enough income to survive. And this is honestly quite different because this is something that you wouldn't ever think about that would be success, like would actually happen, because now there are smaller YouTubers where they might post once a week on top of their jobs, but they still get that passive income from ad revenue. For example, Ali Abdal and Nas Nur Ali, these are just students who happen to be able to take their opportunity, have that specific skill they have.
I mean, Ali Abdal, junior doctor who quit his job just for content.
All right, yeah, exactly. So it's honestly a very nice thing. Like now you could be posting tech reviews, get companies sending you tech products, you review them, and just cycle of passive income that's coming that you never would have thought was possible just possibly 5 years ago or something. And it's nice that you start at a young age, which I think is really important.
Yeah, so is there anything else you want to mention?
No, do you want to? So one thing that Not Overthinking Like Ali's podcast does is they have a weekly insight where they just talk about something insightful every week. Do you have any insights of this week which would be nice to share?
So obviously this week's pretty exciting. You know, tomorrow we're going out. You know.
Yeah, with some friends on. Shout out to Masato, who's future football star, definitely. It's his birthday. We're just going out, hang out, just go for. Of course, we have to stay safe because of all the COVID-19
But
stuff.
you know, we live in Hong Kong, so everything's like a bit, you know,
slowly returning back to normal. Daily insights. I think what I might actually do for my daily insights is I'll give out a Stoic quote every week. As I've been reading a lot about Stoicism, I think it might be nice to give out a thought or a quote every week, and maybe I can get Kieran's thought on it and like what it means to him without actually knowing too much about Stoicism. Okay, so the quote is, I'll pick out my list. One of the Stoic quotes is, "Luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity," by Seneca, which is a Stoic philosopher. So what do you make of that?
I think there's like a couple examples. You know, the YouTuber Dream, who's really blew up
Yeah,
this year.
YouTube. Yeah, Dream.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So he's explaining this concept of how he was. Okay, so basically, when he blew up, a lot of people called him lucky, and
Yeah.
he talked about how he actually found out the YouTube algorithm and he planned out how he would blow up. And the reason he got lucky was because he put himself out there. And luck is and like think about it like this. If you met like walking around, you talk to someone every single day, you always said hello. And then imagine you come across like a famous movie director who sees how nice you are and maybe wants to cast you for their latest movie, and then you become a star. But you people can call you lucky, but like the reason you actually became movie star was because you actually put yourself out there and talk to these people every single day.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's how at least I would interpret this.
Yeah, so like luck is when preparation, which is what you've done previously, like Dream. He's been maybe posting consistently, making sure his content is getting well. Opportunity is when he discovered the algorithm, the YouTube algorithm, and luck is just what happens when he combines the two together. Luck is quite an interesting thing, interesting idea because luck is not quantifiable. You can't just measure how lucky someone is. Differently to, for example, if you want to measure how good someone at chess is, you have a rating where you can compare, but you can't really compare how lucky someone is. You can't just look at them and be able to calculate how much luck they have. So yeah, luck is definitely a very interesting thing to bring about.
Yeah. And I do feel like a lot of people like unfairly criticize people for being lucky
Yeah,
when
definitely.
yeah, I think that's something
That
that a lot of people face.
Yeah, so like luck shouldn't be something that. Yeah, I think one of the problems is that we often don't put ourselves out there or try that hard because we like, oh, we're not as lucky as them. But the fact is, as that quote has said, luck is when preparation meets opportunity. You can't get lucky if you don't have that preparation. And I think, I'm not sure where it came across this mental model, but the more you put yourself out there, the more possibilities of luck. This is quite basic statistics / math in a sense, where you're maximizing your exposure, in which then comes more opportunity when you have the right preparation.
I mean, like, look at this podcast. You know, we're putting ourselves out there. Maybe we could be lucky. You know, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? Of course.
I mean, this is a brilliant quote, I think, to end off the podcast.
And that's it. Thank you for listening to our podcast episode. Please be sure to leave us a review at Apple Podcasts. You can also send us an email at hi@recalllois.com. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to share this podcast with friends and family. And we'll see you in the next one.